Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started in 1 minute as we're waiting for some people to join.
Good morning. This is David Young with Housing Action Illinois, and thank you for joining our webinar regarding the Illinois Anti-Predatory Lending Database. Today, your presenters are David Young with Housing Action Illinois, and also Ira Tangi, who is the Director of Anti-Predatory Lending Program for the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, otherwise IDFPR. Most of you know about Housing Action Illinois, but as just a brief reminder, we are a membership-based organization, and we work to improve housing across the state of Illinois. We have about 160 organizations that are members that work to protect and expand access to affordable housing across the state. And Housing Action Illinois helps those member organizations as well as other organizations in Illinois through public education and organizing, capacity building, and policy advocacy. Most of you are familiar with our AmeriCorps Vista network, which is part of our public education and organizing activities, and also our HUD Housing Counseling Intermediary, which is part of our capacity building activities. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. There should be a text box on your screen. Please use that to write your questions. We will be taking breaks at specific points during the presentation to answer any questions that you might have. So please write in your questions as you have them, and then when we reach those points where we are taking questions, we will answer or ask the questions at that point and answer them. And also, there will be a recording of this webinar, and it will be available on the Housing Action Illinois website, which is housingactionil.org. Our agenda today is to talk about the Anti-Predatory Lending Database, which was set up by the state of Illinois through law and is administered by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. Our purpose our agenda is to talk about the purpose of APLD, the properties that are subject to APLD, the loan types that trigger APLD, how APLD actually works, what role housing counselors play in this process, which agencies can provide counseling, counseling fees, and then we will have a presentation by Ira Tangi from IDFPR and closing remarks. So the purpose of the Anti-Predatory Lending Database is to assist borrowers in understanding the conditions of applied for loans in order to reduce predatory lending practices. So the state was very concerned during the financial crisis in 2008 about this type of lending activity and wanted to protect citizens and established the Anti-Predatory Lending Database in order to do so. So it is designed to protect consumers by making sure that they have very good information before signing for a mortgage product. The Anti-Predatory Lending Database first started in 2008 in Cook County, and it was expanded in July 2010 to include Kane, Peoria, and Will counties. So today, the program is still active in Cook, Kane, Peoria, and Will counties. Those are the only 4 counties in the state of Illinois where the Anti-Predatory Lending Database is in effect. The properties that are impacted by the Anti-Predatory Lending Database include 1 to 4 unit owner-occupied residential properties. So they are properties where a buyer is actually going to be living in the property. So it could be up to, as I said, 1 to 4 units and will be occupied by the resident. Properties that are not subject to the Anti-Predatory Lending Database are properties that are not owner-occupied, that are commercial, that are greater than 4 units, and that are government properties. The types of loans that trigger APLD are purchase money mortgages for first-time buyers. So if a buyer is looking to purchase for the first time, the loan terms could trigger APLD, and also refinance transactions. The loans that are exempt from APLD would be a home equity conversion mortgage or a reverse mortgage. The conditions that trigger APLD include interest-only payments, a loan that may result in a negative amortization, that the total points and fees payable by the borrower at or prior to closing exceed 5% of the loan amount, there's a prepayment penalty for the loan, or it's an adjustable rate mortgage, which allows adjustments of interest rate in the first 3 years. So again, if it permits interest-only payments, results in a negative amortization, the total points and fees payable by the borrower at or prior to closing exceed 5% of the loan amount, there's a prepayment penalty, there's an adjustable rate mortgage, which allows adjustments of interest rate in the first 3 years. How does the Anti-Predatory Lending Database work? The loan originator registers and enters the loan details into the database. And so once a loan is originated, the originator or the loan broker must enter the information about the loan and the terms of the loan within 10 business days into the Anti-Predatory Lending Database. Once that's done, the database will first determine if the property type is subject to APLD. So as we mentioned earlier, the database will determine, is it a 1 through 4 unit that is owner occupied, and if so, then there would be the next step. If the property is subject, the database will determine if it's necessary for the prospective borrower to obtain counseling. If no counseling is required, then the loan may proceed to closing. If counseling is required, the buyer will be notified by the broker or originator, whoever created the loan, and given a list of participating counseling agencies that they can reach out to get predatory lending counseling. Who can use the database? The database users include mortgage brokers and loan originators that are licensed by the Division of Banking, housing counselors from HUD approved agencies, or closing agents. In order for you to use that database, you must register, obtain a login name, and receive training. Are there any questions at this time?
Yes, we have one question. Does this presentation only apply to those 4 counties mentioned?
That is correct. So this presentation regarding the anti-predatory lending database applies to the 4 counties, to Cook, Kane, Peoria, and Will. So for a housing counseling organization, if you are based in one of those 4 counties, then this applies to you. But also for a housing counseling organization, and we will talk about this a little bit more, if you are a housing counseling organization in metropolitan Chicago, for example, maybe you're based in DuPage County, if someone from Cook County reaches out to you, then you could provide that counseling, because the person that is looking for counseling, they are looking to buy a property that is located in Cook County, or they are looking to buy a property that is located in Kane County. So for housing counseling organizations, especially in metropolitan Chicago, it might be of interest to remain on the line and hear all the information, because if a consumer contacts you saying, I am buying a property in Kane County, or I'm buying a property in Will County, and I was referred to you, you might be in the position to provide them with assistance. Any other questions before we move forward?
Yes, we got another question. Does the program apply only to state licenses as opposed to federally regulated lenders?
So let me, can you hear us, Ira, at this point? Because I think it might be best for you to answer that question.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. What was that question again?
Does the program apply only to state licenses as opposed to federally regulated lenders?
Yes. Federal lenders are, especially banks, are exempt from the APLD.
Very good. Any other questions?
They have to be licensed in Illinois.
Okay.
Thank you. No, there are no other questions.
Okay, then we will move forward. Let's talk about the role of counselors in the APLD. So counseling is required if you have item 1 plus item 2. So item 1 is a purchase money transaction where the borrower is the first-time purchaser or refinancing a primary residence. And 2, if the loan is a mortgage that includes one of the following. And as we had talked about earlier, if it permits interest-only payments, if it may result in negative amortization, if it includes a prepayment penalty, allows for an adjustment of interest rate in the first 3 years if it's an adjustable mortgage, and the total points and fees payable by the borrower at or before closing exceeds 5% of the loan amount. So how does the counseling process work? If counseling is required, then the originator or the broker will provide the borrower with a list of participating agencies. The agencies must be HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. The counselor will compare the information included in the database with the loan documents provided by the consumer and will provide recommendations. So, for example, if a consumer comes to you with the loan terms, and the loan terms show that there is a prepayment penalty, then it would be expected that the housing counselor would explain to the consumer about the prepayment penalty, what it means, what it could cost, and also explain what types of alternative mortgage types could be available. It is ultimately up to the consumer to decide whether or not to proceed with the loan. So, in this capacity, the housing counselor is providing information or recommendations, but is not in a position to tell a consumer that they cannot take out that loan. It is up to the consumer. This is just the opportunity for the housing counselor and the state of Illinois through APLD to make sure that the consumer has as much information as possible to make the best decision for his or her circumstances. So what happens next? If a consumer chooses to move forward with the loan post-counseling, then the loan would move to closing. And this is where a closing agent from a title company becomes involved in the process. A closing agent will look at the information in APLD to make sure that the loan that is being closed, that the terms of the loan that is being closed are exactly the same as what was entered into APLD by the broker originator. If there have been no changes or no increases of more than 200 basis points to the interest rate, then the closing agent will mark the loan ready to close, and then a certificate of compliance will be issued for closing. So again, which agencies can provide counseling? HUD-approved housing counseling agencies are the only ones that can provide counseling for the anti-predatory lending database. The mortgage broker will provide consumer a list of participating counseling agencies to the client. We would like to streamline that list because currently the list that is provided is the HUD list that shows all of the HUD-approved housing counseling agencies in Illinois. We would like to streamline that list for IDFPR and focus on housing counseling agencies, especially in the 4 counties that want to provide this type of counseling. And then that way, it'll be easier for the originators, the brokers, and the consumers to find the organizations that will provide the counseling for them. So if you are interested, if you are a housing counseling agency that is interested in providing this type of counseling, please notify us at intermediary@housingactionil.org, and then we can send an updated list to IDFPR. So how does one register for the anti-predatory lending database? The housing counseling organization needs to choose one individual to be the administrator. And then the administrator can give other counselors in their organization access to the anti-predatory lending database. In order to register for the APLD, you would call 888-455-2753 or email service@ilapld.com to register. And again, that's 888-455-2753 or service@ilapld.com to register. One of the features of APLD is when this legislation was approved many years ago, the state legislature understood that there should be a fee that housing counselors could charge for providing this counseling service. So a counseling session which is expected to last anywhere from 1 to 2 hours with a consumer. A housing counseling organization can charge a fee that does not exceed $300. So you are able to charge a fee. That fee cannot exceed $300, and the broker or the loan originator is responsible for paying the housing counseling fee. The fee is not to be paid by the consumer, it is to be paid by the mortgage broker or mortgage originator. So again, a housing counseling organization that decides to do this type of counseling activity can charge up to $300 to perform this service. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we have two questions. The first one, or a few questions actually. The first one is, why are lenders permitted to do loans that would fall into predatory categories? Are we expecting different results by educating the buyers and not passing rules or regulations to stop the predatory lending practices?
So the answer to that question is that yes, we are looking to educate consumers to make sure that they understand loans that would be considered predatory. With legislation, we can always look to eliminate one type of loan, but in a very fast-moving industry, there are new types of products that are created all the time. So if we are in a position where we can make sure that consumers receive top quality counseling prior to closing on a product, it helps to make sure that the consumer is making the best decision for his or her circumstance. So that's really I think the best explanation for why something like this exists, for making sure that we have this type of service available for consumers, because the mortgage industry is very sophisticated, products change all the time, and legislation is slow. So by having something like this, it allows for the state of Illinois through IDFPR to provide the best information to consumers so that they can make a decision based on the product that they're being offered. Next question.
Does the broker know that they can be charged a fee? Must the fee be paid before closing? And a similar question as a follow-up, can the fee be charged to the buyer through the loan closing process?
So one, the broker does know by participating in the APLD that they are responsible for paying the fee. But that doesn't mean that as a housing counseling organization, when a broker reaches out to you, that you shouldn't remind the broker that they are responsible for that. The broker should either pay the fee prior to the counseling or immediately after the counseling. It is probably something that you would want to, as a housing counselor, be prepared to invoice to the broker, because then that way, if that's not paid, you have proof that it hasn't been paid and you could report that. And then what was the third part of the question?
Can the fee be charged to the buyer through the loan closing process?
So if the broker tried to charge the fee to the counselor through the closing process, let's say that after the counseling session that there was an additional charge of $300, that has the potential of changing the terms and the fees of the loan, which would trigger APLD again. So it is not in the interest of a broker to do that because it could trigger APLD a second time and require a second round of counseling. Okay, we'll move forward. So we're going to turn this over now to Ira Tangi, who is the director of the Anti-Predatory Lending Program at IDFPR. And he's going to talk a bit about how IDFPR works to protect consumers, about APLD statistics and financial literacy, and some more information. So thank you, Ira, for being available today. We really appreciate it, and I will turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. And of course, David, I wanted to thank you for asking me to be a part of this webinar. Your presentation was so thorough that I don't know if there's much for me to add, but I'll give it a try. A little history on the APLD, and I know some of this has been covered. The APLD is Public Act 765 ILCS 77/70, and it's called the Predatory Lending Database Program. And it was actually the switch was flipped on, as was mentioned earlier, July 1st of 2008. And originally in 2008, it was only Cook County. The idea back then was to expand it to all 102 counties. Unfortunately, because of the crisis with the state, the monetary crisis with the state, 3 more counties were added in 2010. And let's go to the next slide. The role of IDFPR is works with the governor, legislators, consumer groups, and the lending industry to develop and implement programs to protect consumers while ensuring vitality of the mortgage industry. And that would be more for the role of Division of Banks, which is an agency within IDFPR. What we would really want to focus on is the role of the APLD with the state of Illinois. And the purpose of the program was really, as David mentioned earlier, to reduce predatory lending practices by assisting the borrowers in understanding the terms and conditions of the loan for which he or she has applied. And the Act, as you know, does not prohibit any type of loan. And much of the mortgage industry thinks that the APLD is prohibiting these types of loans, but we're not. And it is solely the borrower's decision based on your help working with the borrowers as to whether they should proceed or not. And when I was approached by the state to head up this program in 2008, and I've been with it ever since the get-go in 2008. I spent 20 plus years in the mortgage industry, and when they presented this program to me and they showed me a 20-minute video on the program, having had attended many closings, I experienced an awful lot of borrowers that were selling their properties, becoming surprised and shocked at the time the money was being dispensed, that they had no idea that the mortgage they had a prepayment penalty and other items which can take away from the amount of monies that they were to receive at closing. And the question always was, why didn't you know that? And the answer from many of our constituency and borrowers was, it was never explained to me. So I must say that all of you counselors, you're the front line, and we depend on you very much to work with the borrowers and explain these programs to the borrowers and enable them to make a decision as to whether they want to proceed with the program or not. Because, and I must say, and I wanted to say this earlier, that all of you, thank you for your hard work. You do a great job. I do speak with many of our borrowers, and I always get a good answer from them regarding the counseling that they received, that it was very thorough and enabled them and helped them make decisions as to how to proceed with the mortgage. Uh, next slide, please. I wanted to go over some statistics. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the APLD releases 6 reports a year, and that was part of the statute, and that it was necessary to release these reports and make them public and to release them to the legislature down in Springfield. And 4 of the reports are basically statistics done on a quarterly basis, and then on a semi-annual basis, there's what we call the APLD semi-annual report. And these graphs are part of the semi-annual report. And as some of you who are already working with the APLD, you know that there's a technology company called Veritech that's very much involved with the APLD, and they assist us and they aid us, and they pound the numbers for us, and they track everything, and they create these lovely graphs. And this gives you an idea as to the percentage of the different types of loans that are hitting triggers. And this goes back to 2008. So what you're seeing here is prepayment penalty was the most egregious, and I don't say that lightly, but the most egregious loan that the mortgage industry was using to hit triggers in the APLD. And that has shifted around because there were some federal TRID regulation on prepayment penalties. So quite frankly, most mortgage companies today, they're not prohibitive from offering these types of mortgages, but most mortgage companies and mortgage brokers are staying away from prepayment penalties. And interest only is still getting big numbers on how it's being used. Neg-Am has always been lower on the graph, and adjustable rate continues to shrink. Next slide, please. This is an interesting slide, and this is again part of the semi-annual report, and it's done every 6 months. These are facts at a glance, and these go back to 2008. And as you can see, almost 1.1 million loans have been registered with the APLD since its inception, and 606,000 of those loans have been closed. 11,096, almost 11,100 loans required counseling. So that's quite a substantial number. And it gives a breakdown depending on what county you're in as to what counties the counseling is done in. Cook County, of course, is the largest. Kane, followed by Peoria, or followed by Will. I should say Will and then Kane, followed by Peoria. And the numbers you see here, the percentages continue on all the way to the present. So Cook County is still by far the county that has the most loans being put through the APLD, followed by Will and then Kane and then Peoria. Types of loans requiring counseling, and again, these are from the get-go. So these and I have a later slide which will give you something more recent. But interest-only loans were number one on the trigger loans, followed by points and fees, followed by prepayment penalty. And again, that will continue to shrink because most mortgage companies are staying away from prepayment penalty loans because of the TRID rules. Loans with points and fees exceeding 5% is number 3. And I must add, and you'll see later on, that seems to be the most popular place right now that loan originators are using, and when inputted into the APLD are hitting the triggers. Points and fees exceeding 5% is something that's really being pushed to the maximum. And a lot of these borrowers aren't realizing that they're paying those kind of fees. And again, that would be part of your job, is to explain to them that, you're paying almost 5%. Or above 5%. That's why they're getting the counseling, which could be rather egregious and makes it very expensive for people to do business in the state of Illinois, real estate business that is, and purchasing a home. Loans requiring counseling that had loan terms changed after counseling, was 25,000 loans, and that number really reflects and shows that the counselors are doing their job, because basically what that is saying is 25,000 people decided after getting the counseling that they don't want that loan anymore, and we find statistically that they'll go to just a conventional 30-year loan. So I think that's a big number, and we talk about that number a lot, that it shows that the APLD is doing its job. Again, not telling people they can't take that loan, but if they decide to go ahead with that loan, they have to understand the terms and conditions of that loan and what the consequences could be throughout the life of that loan. And actively licensed mortgage brokers and loan originators who have entered loans, almost 9,600 from the inception. Next slide, please. More statistics. And this shows the past two semi-annual reports and what's been going on since October of 2017 all the way up until April of 2018. The next report will be coming out November 1st, so we were just now starting to work on it and compiling all the numbers. But as you can see here, that it shows that the volume has been down. The amount of loans that were registered with the APLD in October of 17 were 72,000 versus 56,000 or almost 57,000 in April. And you can see a breakdown down the list of refinancing primary residences, purchasing primary residence. You can see that in every category, there's been a trend down. But I have been hearing that has been turning around, and I'm anxious to see what the new numbers are going to show. And I have a feeling that the November numbers are going to show an increase from April numbers. Again, you could look at the loans closed in the APLD, 37,000 down to 29,000. The borrowers requiring counseling in that 6-month period was again actually increased from 483 to 606. And that's an interesting number, because that just kind of confirms the fact that the mortgage industry is using more predacious loans to get their houses or get their mortgages done for borrowers. So that's kind of a scary trend. And as David was indicating before, there's a lot of new programs coming out. A lot of the mortgage companies from what we have monitored are starting to push the what we consider the predatory loans, the prepayment penalty loans, or the adjustable rate loans are becoming very popular. And the more interesting NAG-AM loans, and of course the number one topic you can see here from October to April in the way of points and fees, the biggest increase was really there from 208 to 334. And again, these are interesting numbers because you have almost 16,000 less loans in that period, yet you have increases in these areas. So that's just showing you that, you know, the industry is still very active. And I hear that all the time from people. Well, you know, why do you need the APLD? These loans are gone. Mortgage companies do not use them anymore, and that couldn't be further from the truth, because the information that we have and the memos that we get is that these kind of loans are on the increase. And usually they start on the West Coast and then they move east, and we're getting more and more of these loans that are being sold to Illinois residences from our licensees in the mortgage business. And then again, this shows loans modified after counseling. This is after counseling, 1,500 and 1,400 in that 6-month period. And again, we feel good about that kind of a number, because again, it shows that the counseling aspect and the APLD is working and protecting our consumers in Illinois. And of course, the last number is the loans that are exempt from the APLD. Next slide, please. This gives us a view of what's going on from county to county in the most recent reporting period. And, as you probably expected, Cook County is far and above everyone else. Will County is also very active, and we field a lot of calls from the Will County Recorder regarding the APLD. And again, it gives us a breakdown as to the types of loans that are being done, the amount of loans that are being closed in the APLD, the borrowers that are requiring counseling. In the last 6-month period in Illinois, 282 people required counseling in Illinois. Will County was 47, Kane County 24, and Peoria County was 8. And then it gives you a breakdown as to the types of loans. And as you can see, in Cook County, loans with points and fees exceeding 5% is way on the upswing. And again, that's something that got to be explained to our borrowers as to, are they willing to pay these kind of fees? Do they know that they're being charged these kind of fees? And my favorite statistic is loans modified to avoid counseling. In Cook County was 761, 133 in Will County, 76 in Kane, and 28 in Peoria County. And then, of course, the loans that were exempt from the APLD. Can we go to the next slide, please? This gives us a breakdown of the APLD in the 4-county program area. Just a number, give you an idea as to how many loan originators that we have registered in the APLD is 9,391. Closing agents 8,700, and these are actually nationwide, because we have a lot of loan originators that are based out of different states, but they're licensed to do business in Illinois. And as you probably know, that the mortgage industry is changing. There's a lot of online type of lending, and then when they have to close the loan, or if they have to deal with the APLD, they contact the different agencies, the counseling agencies, and they try to arrange counseling if it's necessary. And they also contact closing agents that are close in the area to close on the loans. Next slide, please. And again, this gives you a profile as to the APLD loan profile. 6,604 refinance loans versus 1,220 first-time home buyer loans were inputted into the APLD in the last 6-month period. Next slide, please. This is an interesting statistic, because one of the pushbacks on the APLD was that it's going to take a lot longer to close a loan if counseling is needed, and we've been tracking that since 2008. And as you can see, that loans that need counseling actually close sooner than loans that need counseling just close a day later than loans that do not need counseling. So thank you for the turnaround on that. Next slide, please. Okay. Part of the presentation was regarding financial literacy, and that is something that not so much that I work with, but I work very closely with an agency that was newly created in the state of Illinois, and we refer to it as IFLY, which is the Illinois Financial Literacy Initiative. And I don't know how familiar any of you are with this, but there's a gentleman by the name of Terry Walsh that is running this, and Terry's been very active in running around the state of Illinois promoting financial literacy in the state. And if we can go to the, can you click on the link, please? Is that possible? No.
I did click on the link. It should be open.
Okay. All right. Is it open on your end? It's not showing on mine.
Okay. It's open on my end.
Okay. Well, if you can see it, it basically show you how active Terry is with his group of people, and working very closely with different agencies around the state. Can you switch to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Okay. The partners that he has with nonprofit and state agencies to develop and provide education on free financial resources. And he's working very closely with the Center for Economic Progress, the Heartland Alliance, Illinois Joining Forces, and the Illinois Department of Corrections. Heartland Alliance course catalog for financial literacy workshops is in the handout sections, and if you can get on the website, and for those of you that are interested, you can go on the IDFPR website and just Google idfpr.com and get on the website. And when you are on the website, on the upper right-hand corner, you can go to a link that says Consumers, and you can click on that link, and then you can get to the Illinois Financial Literacy Initiative, and it'll show you everything that they are doing and what they're active in, and it will also give you contact information if anyone's at all interested in Terry Walsh, if you wanted to speak with him or maybe partner with him, if that's possible. Terry is always open to many things, so that might be something that you might want to consider. Next slide, please. And that is the presentation. And here you see my contact information. And I wanted to encourage all of you, those that are working with the APLD, if you ever need any kind of questions to be answered, or if you have a problem, I'm always available. You can email me, and I have spoken to many of you. You can call me direct. I take all the calls that come in. And for those of you, of course, that are not signed up with the APLD or registered with the APLD, we encourage you to do so. And again, if you have questions regarding the APLD and any questions at all regarding the program, contact me either way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ira. Let's see what questions we have.
Okay. First question, are there data on the number of loans where consumers decline the loans after counseling?
Yes, I believe that was in the data that that we went through.
And this question is with regards to the facts at a glance slide. How is it that only 11,000 required counseling and 25,000 loans had loan terms changed after counseling?
Well, if the loan terms were changed after counseling,
let's see, just making sure that I am in the right place.
Yeah. So am I. I think that's APLD facts at a glance. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So I see the loans requiring counseling that had loan terms changed after counseling. Is that what the question is referring to, Hoda?
Yeah.
Yes. That one and the third statistic as well, I believe.
Okay, those are those interesting, and we've been asked that before, and that's how Veritech is issuing the statistics. But I believe that borrowers requiring counseling, I really can't answer that for you. I can research that and give you. I don't want to try to give you an answer that's not a correct answer. But I can get that answer, if you want to leave me or call me, please do, because I will have an answer for that. And I've been asked that before. We were asked that years ago, and there was a question. There was an answer from Veritech that had a semblance of oh, I understand now. But unfortunately, I can't give you that answer to answer your question on that.
Was there another question?
Yes, 3 more questions. Have any of the APLD statistics resulted in litigation through the Attorney General's office?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
And everybody, it is law, the APLD. Everybody has to go through counseling. I mean, or every loan has to be inputted into the APLD. And if counseling is called for, we've had many people, we've had celebrities, local celebrities that have tried to get out of it, but I'm so-and-so, so-and-so, why do I need this counseling? You need the counseling. Everybody's got to follow the law. Everybody's got to follow the statute. We have, to my understanding, we've never been challenged on that. I'm sure if we have been challenged on that or were challenged on that, I'd be aware of it. But to my knowledge, no, we have not.
Okay, we have another question. What about other predatory loans, non-home based? Are there requirements for similar counseling and education efforts for a Quicken type loan? One with interest rates in the greater than 100% range. What financial education resources are available for people in these situations?
Well, I think Ira had mentioned that that a lot of the loans now are being done online, and that those loans, depending on the terms, can be subject to the anti-predatory lending database as well.
Yes.
So if you are using Quicken loans or guaranteed rate, depending on the terms that you are offered, that information still has to be entered into the APLD and could trigger the counseling requirement. If things are, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ira.
No, I was going to say, if it hits a trigger, the counseling is going to be required. And you brought up Quicken loans. Quicken is the biggest user of the APLD in Illinois. Last year, I believe about 140,000 loans were registered and put through the APLD, of which about 40,000 were put through from guaranteed rate. They are our biggest user, and quite frankly, they work very closely with us, and they want to abide by the rules and the regulations, and they're very good at that, and they do. But no, you hit a trigger, you have to take the counseling.
We have another question.
Go ahead, David.
Is any follow-up counseling required?
Follow-up counseling?
The only time that there would be a follow-up counseling is if the loan terms change and it triggers APLD again, then there could be follow-up counseling required. But generally, once the consumer has gone through counseling and has a better understanding of the loan terms and what the ramifications of taking out that loan will be, the loan terms are usually changed so that it will not further trigger APLD.
Right. We had one instance several years ago where the borrower went through the wrong type of counseling, and we don't want to inconvenience the borrowers, and we gave the borrower the choice of taking the correct counseling if they would want to, and of course they said no, they do not. But they seem to have had a grasp of the kind of loan that they took, so we did not tell them that you have to retake or take the correct kind of counseling.
Any other questions, Hoda?
No, there are no other questions.
Okay. Well then, We'd like to thank you for tuning in to our APLD webinar. We hope that you have found this to be informative. We look forward to providing more webinars to you in the future. And I'd really like to thank Ira Tangi from the APLD program with IDFPR for joining us. Remember that you can reach out to Ira if you have any additional questions. His information is on the screen, so please reach out to him. Please make sure that if your organization wishes to provide this type of counseling, that you reach out to us at intermediary@housingactionil.org, and we will provide that. We will make sure that that list is available to APLD and IPFDR. And again, we thank you for participating, and that concludes this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ira.
You're welcome, David. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely.